Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the work of Pastor Anil Allay. For over 25 years, he's been championing a pretty bold idea that miracles and divine healing aren't just something you read about in old books. He believes they're happening right here, right now. So let's just jump right into the big question, right? Does God still heal people today? Now, for a lot of people, that's up for debate. But for Pastor Allay, it's not even a question. It's the very foundation of his ministry. He argues that the same power we read about is still available, but he says it starts in a place you might not expect. To really get where he's coming from on healing, you first have to understand what he means by revival. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but he has a very specific and very personal definition for it.
See, for him, revival isn't some giant event you put on a calendar or host in the stadium. No, he says it's an internal, spiritual awakening that happens inside just one person. It's a personal transformation that then starts to create a ripple effect.
And this really breaks down that path he talks about. It's like a chain reaction. It all kicks off with one person's change, that inner awakening. Then it naturally spreads to their family. And once families start changing, the entire church gets revitalized. But it happens from the ground up. Okay, so let's say this revival happens. What next? Well, Pastor Allay believes this is when spiritual gifts, things like healing, can start to show up. But, and this is a huge but, he's very clear that they come with a really important condition.
Here's where he makes a super important distinction. He explains that having spiritual gifts without love, well, it's just noise. It's like a clanging, noisy cymbal, just disruptive and without purpose. But when you pair those very same gifts with genuine love, that's when it becomes effective service. So you see, it's not just about what you can do, but why you're doing it.
And you know what? He takes it even one step further. He says, forget all the miraculous powers for a second. The greatest, most powerful gift anyone can have? Humility. For him, that's the bedrock. Everything else has to be built on that foundation.
All right, so that's the framework. But what does it actually look like in the real world? Pastor Allay has tons of stories from his 2.5 decades in ministry that he says show this whole thing in action.
Let's take a look at one of his most powerful testimonies. It's about a man named Deepak J.C. And get this, he was carried into a prayer meeting on a bed sheet because he was completely paralyzed from the waist down.
Now, what happened next is pretty incredible. But Pastor Allay is really clear about something. He says it wasn't just his prayer that did it. He insists that it was the man's own deep, powerful faith combined with that prayer that led to him literally standing up and walking out of that meeting on his own 2 feet.
And boom, there's that ripple effect we were talking about. The story doesn't just end with his healing. That same man, Deepak J.C., went on to establish seven different churches all across Nepal. It's the perfect example of how one miracle can multiply into a massive community impact.
And honestly, that's just one story. He shares so many other dramatic accounts. He talks about a woman whose uterine tumor reportedly passed right out of her body after prayer, a man whose arm tumor that he'd had for 18 years just vanished in an instant. There are even reports of cancer patients going into remission.
For Pastor Allay, all these incredible personal stories, they're all pointing to a bigger picture, a wider message for the church today, and it all comes down to one critical idea: unity.
And he has this really simple but honestly brilliant way of explaining it. Think about the fingers on your hand. Each one on its own, the pinky, the ring finger, all of them, is kind of weak, right? He says that's what church members are like when they're disconnected from each other.
But what happens when you bring all those individual fingers together? You get a fist. And that fist is a symbol of incredible strength, of real power and potential. That, he says, is the model for a truly healthy church. And this leads him to a pretty sharp observation. He believes many churches today talk about revival, but they lack real power because they lack true unity. Without that collective strength, he argues, all the talk in the world remains just that, words.
This all builds to one final, really thought-provoking idea about our purpose and potential, and he frames it through a well-known biblical story.
He brings up the story of a donkey, just tied up in a village, seemingly insignificant, and he uses this as a powerful metaphor for people today who are tied up by their own struggles, whether it's addiction, sin, sickness, or just plain hopelessness.
The disciples were given a simple command: go and untie that donkey, because it has a higher purpose. In the same way, Pastor Allay believes his calling is to help untie people from whatever is binding them so they too can fulfill their own divine purpose.
And so that leaves us with this final, challenging question that his whole ministry really asks. It totally reframes the conversation, doesn't it? It shifts it away from simply believing in miracles to actively participating in them. It's not just about being healed, but about becoming a vessel for a greater purpose. So, the question is, today, who is ready?